always thought my marriage was safe. People used to look at us and call us the couple that had it all figured out. We had been together long enough that the little quirks and habits were woven into the fabric of everyday life. He liked his coffee strong, black with no sugar, while I always needed mine sweet with a splash of cream. He would joke that I ruined perfectly good coffee, and I would laugh every time because it felt like one of those harmless exchanges that defined us. Our mornings were built on small rituals. Him reading the news on his phone, me humming while making breakfast. It seemed ordinary, but I loved those ordinary moments because they meant stability, comfort, and trust. We built routines around each other without even thinking. He always texted me at lunch, just a quick "how's your day?" message that made me feel remembered. Evenings were our little haven. Sometimes we cooked together, sometimes we ordered takeout and curled up on the couch to watch whatever show we were binging. Our friends often told us they admired how close we seemed, how natural our rhythm was. To the outside world, we must have looked unshakable, like a couple who had passed the test of time. And honestly, I believed that too. I let myself feel lucky, even blessed, that I had found someone who chose me every day. But looking back, I realize how easy it is to mistake routine for intimacy. There's comfort in repetition, and comfort can make you blind. I missed the moments when the pattern began to shift, when something subtle was being rewritten under my nose. Started small, almost too small to notice. His "good morning" kiss grew shorter, distracted, like he had somewhere else he'd rather be. The nightly questions about my day faded, replaced by long stretches of silence as he scrolled through his phone. First, I told myself it was nothing. Everyone gets tired, everyone has phases where they seem distant. Marriage isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's just dull embers keeping warm in the background. That's what I convinced myself it was. He began working later, blaming meetings or last-minute deadlines. I wanted to believe him because he had never given me a reason not to. But the more it happened, the more I felt an ache I couldn't quite name. I remember sitting alone at dinner, his plate cooling on the table, and telling myself that dedication to his career was a good thing. Still, I noticed I had stopped waiting for him with excitement. Instead, I was waiting with unease, with questions I didn't dare put into words. When he did come home, there was an invisible wall between us. He smiled, yes, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. I can't count how many times I tried to explain away the changes. He's tired. He's stressed. Maybe he's just going through something he doesn't want to talk about. Maybe it's me. I've been too preoccupied, too distracted. Maybe I'm not as interesting as I once was. That's how it starts, I think. You notice something, but instead of addressing it, you point the blame inward and hope it passes. And yet, the evidence was there if I had chosen to look closely. The phone that used to lie casually on the coffee table was now always face down, and always with him, even in the bathroom. There were late-night showers that didn't make sense, cologne I didn't recognize lingering on his shirt. I brushed it aside, telling myself that suspicion was a disease, one I didn't want infecting us. Trust was supposed to be the core of our relationship, and I thought holding on to that trust was better than risking everything by questioning him. Still, I remember specific moments that gnawed at me. Once, while we were driving together, his phone lit up with a notification. I saw a name I didn't recognize, and when I asked casually, he dismissed it as a coworker. His tone was sharp, defensive, so unlike him. I felt the sting but forced myself to smile, not wanting to seem paranoid. Another time I caught a faint scent of perfume on his jacket, floral and sweet, nothing like what I wear. I laughed it off, told myself maybe someone hugged him at work. These excuses became my survival tool, a way to keep the illusion intact. The truth is, I didn't want to shatter the image of us. I had invested years into building a life together, years into believing that he was my partner, my safe place. To admit something was wrong would mean questioning everything, our past, our vows, the future we had imagined. And so, I kept clinging to what we used to be, replaying the good moments as if they could erase the unease settling in my chest. I told myself that every couple goes through rough patches, that it would pass if I just held on a little tighter. But deep inside, a whisper was growing louder. A whisper that told me I wasn't crazy, that something was slipping away from me. I noticed how he no longer reached for my hand when we walked together, how he avoided eye contact when I said, "I love you." I started wondering when the last time was that he had really looked at me, not just glanced but looked like he used to, with warmth and admiration. I couldn't remember. That realization cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Even with all the signs, I chose silence. I smiled when he walked through the door, pretended not to notice the way he avoided conversation. I convinced myself that love meant patience, that I owed it to our marriage to be understanding. Maybe I was afraid of the answer, afraid that if I pushed too hard, I'd uncover a truth I wasn't ready to face. So I kept pretending, kept waiting for the day when things would feel normal again. And that's the cruelest part of it all. I was living in what felt like the calm before a storm, but I didn't know it yet. I thought I was protecting our marriage by keeping my doubts buried, but what I was really doing was ignoring the cracks forming beneath my feet. Cracks that would eventually widen into a chasm I couldn't cross, no matter how much love I thought I had to give. I tried to keep believing that things would settle down, that he would return to the man I knew, but every passing week made it harder to silence the voice in my head. The distance between us was no longer just emotional. It had become physical, tangible, something I could feel when I sat next to him on the couch or lay beside him in bed. He no longer reached for me at night, no longer brushed against me absent-mindedly the way he used to. Instead, there was space, cold and deliberate, as if he was protecting himself from intimacy. I told myself I was imagining it, but in my heart I knew something had shifted, something he wasn't willing to explain. I started to watch more carefully, not because I wanted to catch him, but because I was desperate to find reassurance. If I could just find one sign that proved my fears wrong, I could breathe again. But the signs I found only deepened my unease. He began staying later at work with no warning, coming home hours after he normally would. When I asked why, he gave vague answers. A project, a client dinner, last-minute paperwork. They were plausible excuses, yet they all sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced them before walking through the door. His words didn't match the uneasiness in his eyes, and I found myself memorizing every little detail, like a detective piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. His appearance changed too. He suddenly cared more about how he looked, buying new shirts, changing his hairstyle, wearing a cologne I had never seen him buy before. He started going to the gym more often, something he hadn't prioritized in years. At first I tried to encourage it, telling myself maybe he just wanted to feel healthier, maybe it was a midlife phase. But deep down I felt the shift. He wasn't dressing for me, he wasn't trying to impress me. It was for someone else. Even the way he used his phone became different. The man who once left it lying around carelessly now guarded it like it held his soul. The password was changed without a word, and the screen never lit up where I could see. If I asked a question, he'd give a clipped response and turn the phone away. Once, I reached for it absent-mindedly when it buzzed on the table, and his reaction was immediate and sharp. He snatched it back and gave me a look that sent a chill down my spine. That was the moment my doubts turned into something heavier, a weight that followed me through the day and kept me awake at night. The nights were the worst. Lying in the dark, hearing him type quietly on his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting faintly against the wall. I would ask who he was talking to, and he would mutter, "Just work," without looking up. I wanted to believe him, but the responses he typed with such focus didn't sound like work emails. I could hear the faint rhythm of conversation, quick replies, pauses filled with anticipation. It wasn't business, it was personal, and it was tearing me apart to admit it. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was overreacting, if I was inventing problems because I was insecure. That self-doubt was almost as painful as the suspicion itself. I started second-guessing everything. Was I enough? Had I let myself go? Was he bored of me? The mirror became my enemy, showing me lines I hadn't noticed before, reminding me of years gone by. I compared myself to the women I imagined he might be drawn to. Women at his office, women with more energy, women who hadn't spent years building a home with him only to feel invisible inside it. And then the proof came, not because I searched for it, but because it practically landed in my hands. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up on the nightstand. I hadn't planned to look, but the message preview was impossible to ignore. A name I didn't know, followed by words that shattered me. "Last night was amazing, I can't stop thinking about you." My body went cold. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the sound of the shower running. I picked up the phone with trembling hands, unlocking it while my mind screamed at me to stop. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know. The messages told a story I didn't want to read. Flirtatious exchanges, late-night confessions, plans to meet again. Words of affection that he hadn't spoken to me in months were now typed out for someone else. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, tears spilling down my face before I even realized I was crying. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, like the room itself was closing in on me. The man I had trusted more than anyone, the man I had built my life with, was living a second life right in front of me. I placed the phone back where it was, wiping my face quickly before he came out of the bathroom. When he walked in, smiling faintly like nothing had happened, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. My mind screamed to confront him, to throw the truth in his face, but my body froze. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. Instead, I smiled back weakly, hiding the storm raging inside me. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing as he slept. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts unraveling faster than I could control. Every moment of our marriage replayed in my head. The vows we had spoken, the laughter we had shared, the promises we had made. All of it felt tainted now, contaminated by the words I had read on that screen. I felt hollow, like a piece of me had been carved out and discarded. The days that followed were filled with confusion. I went through the motions of normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every smile he gave me felt fake, every touch insincere. I watched him leave the house, wondering if he was going to work or to her. I counted the hours until he came home, not with anticipation, but with dread. My mind spun in circles. Should I confront him now? Should I wait? Was there any point in asking questions when I already knew the answers? And yet, even in the face of undeniable truth, I hesitated. Love makes fools of us, and I was clinging to the hope that there might still be an explanation, some version of events that didn't leave me broken. But deep down I knew. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen secrets over honesty, someone who had let me believe we were still a team while building a world with another woman. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was real, and it was mine to carry. The weight of what I had discovered pressed on me until I could barely function. Pretending became unbearable, the act of smiling through the ache almost worse than the betrayal itself. Every word he spoke sounded hollow, every laugh like an echo that belonged to someone I no longer recognized. My silence was not strength anymore, it was suffocation. The questions in my head had become louder than my fear. I knew I couldn't live another day in this limbo. I had to confront him, no matter the cost. When the moment finally came, I wasn't calm, and I wasn't prepared. My voice shook, my hands trembled, but the truth spilled out before I could second-guess myself. I told him I knew. The words tasted bitter as they left my mouth, as if admitting them out loud made them more real. He froze, caught between denial and panic, eyes darting as if searching for an escape route. At first, he laughed nervously, trying to wave it off as my imagination. He said I was tired, paranoid, reading too much into things. But I didn't back down. I repeated what I had seen, every message etched in my memory, every word of intimacy meant for someone else. His denial cracked quickly. The facade of innocence shattered, and what replaced it was anger. He accused me of invading his privacy, of not trusting him, as though the betrayal was mine for daring to uncover his secrets. I stood there stunned by the audacity, but I refused to let him twist the truth. My voice grew firmer, my chest burning with a mix of rage and heartbreak. I told him he owed me honesty, that I deserved to hear it straight from him. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. Then came the breaking point. His shoulders slumped, his gaze dropped, and the fight drained out of him. He admitted it. Not in a grand confession, not with remorse spilling over, but with a quiet, almost careless acknowledgement. Yes, he had been seeing someone else. Yes, it had been going on for months. The simplicity of his words gutted me more than if he had shouted. The man I had trusted with my entire life said it like it was nothing, like my world wasn't collapsing at his feet. The details came slowly, each one like a knife twisting deeper. He said it started as friendship, someone he confided in when things at work became stressful. Then it shifted, blurred lines turning into late nights into something physical. He claimed he hadn't meant for it to happen, that it just did, as though betrayal could ever be accidental. I listened with my heart in pieces, torn between wanting every detail and wishing I had never asked. I asked him if he loved her. The question hung in the air like poison. He hesitated too long, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his answer was vague. "It's not like that," he said. "It's different." Different. As if different made it less devastating. As if different meant it didn't shatter the life we built. I demanded to know why. Why risk everything we had? Why break the vows we made? His answers were weak, empty excuses about feeling unappreciated, about wanting excitement, about something missing. I wanted to scream that marriages aren't meant to be endless thrills, that love is about commitment through the mundane. Instead, I just stood there, numb, the betrayal crushing me until even anger felt out of reach. The more he spoke, the less I recognized him. His words didn't sound like the man I married, the man who once promised me forever. They sounded like a stranger rationalizing choices that had destroyed us. I searched his face for a trace of the person I used to know, but all I saw was guilt laced with defensiveness. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back, refusing to let him see me break completely. I told him how deeply he had hurt me, how every lie had cut deeper than the last. I reminded him of the promises he made, the trust one had given him freely. He sat in silence, unable to meet my gaze. His shame apparent but his remorse uncertain. The conversation stretched on like a wound that refused to close. Every time I thought I had no more questions, another one clawed its way out. Did she know about me? Did she know he was married? Was he planning to leave me for her? His answers varied, sometimes defensive, sometimes evasive, sometimes too honest. The contradictions made my head spin. One moment he swore she meant nothing, the next he admitted he didn't know how to stop. I realized then that it wasn't just the act of betrayal that broke me. It was the realization that the man I thought I knew had become capable of looking me in the eye and lying so easily. The foundation of trust one had built everything on was gone, and without it, the future I imagined with him crumbled. My chest ached as I told him I couldn't unhear his words, couldn't unsee the truth. He reached out, maybe to comfort me, maybe to salvage something, but I stepped back. His touch felt foreign, almost offensive, as if the same hands that had held someone else could no longer touch me without burning. The silence between us was deafening. I had poured out my pain, demanded answers, and all that remained was emptiness. I didn't scream, I didn't throw things, but my calmness was its own form of finality. I told him the marriage we once had no longer existed, that his choices had rewritten our story into something unrecognizable. The words left my mouth heavy and final, hanging in the space between us like a verdict. When the confrontation ended, nothing was resolved. There were no apologies that could erase the damage, no explanations that could restore what was lost. He sat there with his head in his hands, and I walked away with a heart that no longer belonged to him. The truth was out, and though it devastated me, it also freed me from the prison of doubt. I finally saw him clearly, not as the husband I wished he was, but as the man he had chosen to become. The days after the confrontation blurred into one long stretch of emptiness. The silence in the house was suffocating, heavier than any argument we had ever had. He tried to speak a few times, to explain again, to justify, to apologize in fragments, but I had no energy left to hear him. His words meant nothing now. They were just sounds falling into the hollow space between us. What once had been our home now felt like a cage, each corner a reminder of the love we had shared and the betrayal that had poisoned it. I moved through the motions like a ghost. I went to work, answered messages, kept appointments, but it was all mechanical. Inside I was unraveling. Nights were the worst, lying in the same bed with a man who had once been my safe place but now felt like a stranger I could not trust. I would turn my back to him, tears soaking my pillow while he pretended to sleep. The distance was unbearable, but I wasn't ready to leave, not yet. I needed time to process, to find the strength to choose for myself rather than act out of rage. I told no one at first. Keeping it hidden felt like carrying a secret too heavy for my body, but I wasn't ready to hear the pity in people's voices or see the judgment in their eyes. Eventually, I confided in one close friend, someone who had known me long enough to read the pain in my silence. Her reaction was fierce, protective, telling me I deserved better, that I should pack my bags and never look back. Her certainty made me feel weaker, because I couldn't be as decisive. Love doesn't die at the same speed as trust, and that was my prison. I still loved him, even as I hated what he had done. In the quiet moments, I replayed our entire marriage like a film strip in my head. The laughter, the trips, the holidays, the way he used to look at me when I walked into a room. Were those moments real, or had I been blind the entire time? That question tormented me. If he had been capable of betraying me now, what else had he hidden before? The past became contaminated. Memories I once cherished now laced with suspicion. It was as though the life I thought I had lived was being rewritten in front of me, and I no longer knew which parts were true. I tried to picture a future with him, to imagine rebuilding what was broken. Could counseling help? Could forgiveness mend the cracks? The thought made me exhausted. Forgiveness requires honesty, humility, and work from both sides. What I saw in him was guilt, yes, but also confusion, hesitation, and an unwillingness to let go of her completely. I couldn't fight for us alone, and I couldn't force him to choose me without doubt. That realization left me hollow, but it also gave me clarity. One evening, as he sat across from me at the kitchen table, trying to start another half-hearted apology, I told him I couldn't do this anymore. My voice didn't shake. I told him the marriage we had was gone, that he had broken something too sacred to rebuild. His eyes welled up, but I didn't let myself soften. I reminded him that I had given him trust without question, love without condition, and he had thrown it away for moments of excitement. That was his choice, and choices have consequences. I was choosing myself now. The decision wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw things into a suitcase and slam the door. It was quiet, steady, deliberate. I found an apartment, signed a lease, and began moving my things one box at a time. Each object I packed carried a memory, and each memory felt like another wound reopening. But with every box I removed from that house, I felt lighter. The weight of living beside betrayal slowly lifted, replaced by the fragile beginnings of freedom. The first night alone in the new apartment was terrifying. The silence pressed against me, the empty space amplifying my loneliness. I cried until my body ached, mourning not just the marriage but the future I had believed in. Yet beneath the grief there was also relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to smile through the pain or share a bed with lies. The quiet that once suffocated me now held the promise of healing. Over time, the grief transformed into reflection. I realized betrayal isn't just about another person. It's about broken trust, about being forced to question your worth, about having the ground pulled out from under you. I had spent weeks asking what was wrong with me, what I lacked, why I wasn't enough. But slowly, I began to see that his choices said more about him than about me. Infidelity is not proof of someone else's inadequacy. It's proof of a partner's weakness, their inability to honor the commitment they made. Healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt strong, certain I had made the right decision. Other days, I ached for the man I used to know, the man I thought still existed. Grief comes in waves, and I let myself feel every crash, every pull, trusting that with time the tide would recede. I poured my energy into myself, into hobbies I had neglected, friendships I had taken for granted, dreams I had put on hold. Slowly, I rebuilt pieces of myself that I hadn't realized I had lost during the marriage. The biggest lesson I learned was that silence is not protection. I had silenced my doubts for months, convincing myself that trust meant ignoring the signs. In reality, trust should never require blindness. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It only gives it more power to destroy. I wish I had trusted my instincts sooner, but I don't blame myself anymore. Love makes us want to believe, and belief is not weakness. What matters is what we do once the truth is undeniable. Now, when I look back, I don't see myself as broken. I see someone who endured heartbreak and chose not to let it define her. I see someone who walked away from betrayal even though it meant stepping into uncertainty. I see someone who refused to keep living in lies, even when the truth was painful. That, to me, is strength. I don't know what the future holds, but I know it will not be built on deception. I will not lower my standards out of fear of being alone. I will not mistake routine for intimacy again, nor will I silence myself to keep the peace. The scars are there, yes, but scars are proof of healing, not weakness. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small signs. Don't dismiss your gut feelings as paranoia. If you feel the ground shifting beneath you, it's for a reason. Protect your heart, protect your peace, and remember that you deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. Love is not meant to be begged for or stolen back from someone who gave it away. It is meant to be shared freely, safely, and wholeheartedly. My marriage ended the moment I discovered the truth, but my life did not. I am still here, stronger than before, wiser than before, and ready to write a new chapter that isn't defined by betrayal. The pain shaped me, but it does not own me. I didn't expect this from my husband, but I learned that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And even then we can rise, rebuild, and begin again.